and this was brought to me by one of my constituents who has one of these long-term policies, and he's had it for a number of years, and there is different levels of this policy. There's a 3% inflator, a 2% inflator, and a 1% inflator. And somewhere back in 2016, the legislature said, hey, going forward, new policies, you have the ability to move. If you don't want to be at the 3% inflator, you can go down to the 1% inflator. There is a little bit of a cost difference there, and they did that. But they did not make it available for people with policies that had gotten them before 2016. And that is where my constituent landed in. And there is a little ambiguity in the law with the way insurance companies look at this. And so he contacted his insurance company and they said, we're not sure where the law actually is in Minnesota because of the way it's written, whether you have the ability to do that. And he contacted numerous agencies and as well as I did. And this was a very hard bill to track down because while it is an insurance bill, and you would think it is in the Commerce Department, it is actually housed within DHS. And eventually, and I will give much credit here to Mr. Hudella, who put on his detective cap and was able to track down the people that were actually had it. And magically, on a Zoom screen in the fall, several people from DHS magically appeared, and they were like, knew all about this, and they said, if we made this change, they don't believe that there's any even fiscal cost to the state. And so, and I've talked to one of the largest long-term care provider within my district, and they said, this is really important because what we don't want is these people who are now having to pay a little bit more and want to go to the lower inflator is to say, I'm done with this. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to take responsibility for my own long-term care. And then that would eventually, that burden would fall upon the state to take care of them. So we want these people to remain with this policy. And if we could lower it, make it available so that they could go to the lower inflator, it would save them some money. So my constituent, unfortunately, is not available to be here today because of a conflict. But from his testimony that we had within the Human Services Committee, it would save him about $2,660 a year if he could just drop down. And he wants to take responsibility. He wants this insurance because it's with his wife and it's a partnership. He is unable to drop down to that lower inflator. So all this bill would do is say those policies before 2016, you are also available to change the inflator.
Thank you, Senator Kupec. Yeah, you're a lonely guy today. You don't have any testifiers. Is anybody from the public that wants to comment on Senate File 3484? Members of the committee have concerns. So I think the pathway for this bill, we're going to lay it over. Did you have an amendment, by the way?
I did not.
No,
Nope.
you did not. We're going to lay it over, and then I think may turn up in the Human Services budget. So, any questions from the committee? Seeing none, Senator Kupec, Senate File 3484 will be laid over.
Thank you very much. Thank you, committee.
Senator Duckworth. Oh, we don't need to, you don't need to go to the table, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it.
Members, we heard this bill. This is Senate File 4515. We heard it on March 24. We sent it to the Committee on State and Local Government. They sent it back to us. We like it a lot. The question is on the motion of Senator Duckworth that Senate File 4515 as amended be recommended to pass and sent to general orders. Senator Duckworth, did you want to speak to the motion at all?
No, Mr. Chair, just appreciate it. I think we picked up a great co-author along the way.
Here we go, meat raffles, folks. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is adopted. Mr. Anglin. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Anglin. Thank you for giving us a presentation on prediction markets. If you can introduce yourself and then go ahead whenever your AV is ready. We might need to come out there and help you.
Thank you, Chair and members. I will try to plug it in and see if I can get it to work. Can you see it? Nope. Thank you again, Chair and committee members. My name is John Engla. I'm the Director of Minnesota Alcohol and Gambling Enforcement. I'm here to present on sports wagering and prediction markets. And basically, I've been with AGE now for over 20 years. I started back when illegal gambling and illegal sports wagering was done on paper and phones. So I got to sit down and take wagers over the phone in a call center. We've greatly changed in the last 20 years. So basically, AGE, we try to regulate the illegal gambling. We try to regulate the legal gambling, and there's many problems with it, especially some of the platforms that are overseas and we don't have authority over. So today we'll talk about a little bit, just quickly, because I know this is a brief, prediction markets. What are they? Some of the issues, the differences between betting and financial contracts, where our state authority lies, and some of the manipulation and enforcement hurdles that we have in prediction markets. So basically, what is a prediction market? It's an online platform. Basically, at the beginning, prediction markets, they were calling them bets, especially on sports. As they started getting grief on that, they pivoted over to that it was trades, making trades on contracts. A prediction market is, I'm sure everyone's heard it 1,000 times. It can be on sports. It can be whether or not I pass out during this talk or anything else. They're yes and no contracts. They're either you win or you lose. They can be $1, depending on what you're betting on. Is it going to snow tomorrow? Yes or no? And the market on supply and demand will determine what that market is. So is there a 60% chance it's going to snow on Saturday or not? I hope it doesn't, but that's what they're talking. So prediction markets have exploded. Back in 2024, they were estimated at $9 billion in volume. Now they're at $60 billion. And they're wagering, like I said, on all the different, anything you can think of. And the concern is this explosion, if unregulated, you can look at, we have in the state of Minnesota, we started counting how many potentially illegal gambling sites there are. We're currently at 3,800 illegal sites that are available to Minnesotans, where you can pay to play, chance, and win a prize. So we can see that prediction markets could explode because of how popular they are. Because you could end up with good actors and bad actors, some that don't pay out, and then what do? Are they registered with the CFTC? We don't know, but that's stuff that we would have to look into. So here's a weather example of a prediction market. So Saturday, we're supposed to get snow. Nobody wants it, but we're supposed to get snow. So I could go on one of these prediction markets and say, we're gonna get 10 plus inches. I could be the maker or the first trader, and I could say buy $60 worth, and let's say the market says that most of the people are saying, yes, it's going to get 10 inches of snow on Saturday. Then if we do get 10 inches, I win $100. If we don't get 10 inches, I lose all of it. So it's just a yes or no, on or off. If early spring, which we all hope, well, obviously we're having good weather, but Saturday's going to stink. So what is a bet, and does prediction market fit within it? And you read the first one, what are bets in Minnesota, where people mutually agree, a gain or loss based on chance. A prediction market does fit in with that. But there is what are not bets. And what are not bets are bona fide securities or commodities. And Some feel that these prediction markets fit within that because of the what are not bets. So what's the difference between sportsbook and prediction? Sportsbook, they have the house that sets the odds, and of course, the house is always made to win. Over the long term, they're going to. And it's regulated by states. Here in Minnesota, it's illegal, so I guess we try to regulate the illegal. And in prediction markets, it's peer-to-peer. You and I, we determine what the market's going to be based on how much interest there is on whatever we're betting on. And that is regulated by the CFTC, or that's their argument, because of the loophole in our bet statute on what are not bets. So a few things have happened. April 6th, they had New Jersey and Massachusetts courts decided that they could not use their, they could not regulate them at the state level, whereas Nevada, they were successful, and they were able to determine that they can say no to these prediction markets. And Congress is trying to, there has been some proposal to identify what they are. So like in sports, they would say that those aren't prediction markets and that's sports betting. So what are some of the issues that can come up with it? Manipulation, wealthy whales, as you say, it's kind of pump and dump a stock. So for example, if I have a jar of jelly beans, red and blue, and there's, let's say, we don't know what the number is, but we're gonna guess, but the market right now is saying 50% yes is red and 50 cents blue, no. So if I'm a wealthy whale, then I'm gonna try to push that price up by buying yes. And if I buy yes and get it up to 70, then I can dump it and sell it to all the other people that believe me that they're mainly red. So then I can make 20 bucks on my $100 investment if that's what it costs to push it up. Obviously insider trading, you know, if you have inside information on sports, that can be an issue, or legislation, or contracts, anything. Offshore is a big problem for us because we've had cases where the owners in Turkey and the bank accounts are in New Jersey, and there's some over in Australia, and the servers over in Jamaica, and it makes it difficult. So that's why more tools in our toolbox for payment providers or any other affiliates to help us stop it happening in Minnesota helps. The prediction markets do lack some safeguards, especially like you think of teenagers betting on the Vikings and, well, or getting their contract on the Vikings and investing in them. And there's no, you might say that you can't gamble in Minnesota at 18, but in prediction markets you can do it. So it doesn't have some of the same safeguards. That's my quick tour on it there for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Thank you. And do you have any sense of the sort of the scope or volume of these transactions occurring in the state of Minnesota right now?
I do not have the scope or volume for prediction markets in Minnesota at this time, but I can look into it if you'd like.
That's fine. Any other questions? Senator Rest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I was in college, I worked summer jobs at the commercial research department of a large corporation, and my job was to follow the futures market. Would you explain how the futures markets, which are still in place and are very influential on the markets, as you know, how other than this thing about, well, there's no house, I mean, which there's no house in the futures market either, how is it different in terms of the impact? Is it simply because the bets are made on trivial things? Or how is it different?
Mr. Anglin.
Thank you, Chair. Senator Russ. It is way more user-friendly than what it was in the past, first of all. But second of all, they're looking to do some of the more sports gaming, because it does become an issue with corn, corn commodities and different things like that. And how do you exclude those types of things that have already been in place? That's the difficulties defining. So a lot of jurisdictions are looking to just doing sports wagering and some other items, like not allowing for, harm that comes to people, that you're not buying futures on the death of someone else or bombing or stuff like that. That's what they're more looking towards, and not hitting your core of what already exists prior to the prediction market.
Senator Rust.
So would the state of Minnesota be able to prohibit futures markets in commodities? Or is that a violation of the Commerce Clause?
Mr. Anglin.
Chair, Senator Rest, that's what a lot of lawsuits are happening right now, so I can't answer that. I think the courts are going to end up sorting that out for us.
Senator Rust.
Well, Mr. Chairman, sir, I think it would be a great loss to our economy not to have the futures markets in, right now, in petroleum and oil, and or in any of the other commodities, soybeans, corn, whatever. I would hope that we were going to be very, very cautious about entering a realm that we pass off as just, we don't want people betting on, how many people are going to get killed today in Iran on either side. That's morally objectionable and unconscionable. But the price of corn 6 months from now, that's part of our economy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. You might not be the appropriate person to ask this question of, so if that's the case, just let me know, or maybe give me an idea of who might be. But I'll give you an example. Just recently in the Senate, we passed a bill that banned crypto kiosks, because in this very room, we had many people come forward and inform us of a lot of fraud and scams going on that were negatively impacting and harming folks. I'm just curious, as it relates to prediction markets or some of the common popular apps out there, are you or is any other government organization or department getting a huge volume of complaints regarding scams or fraud as it relates to prediction markets? Or is it maybe something that is just maybe more of a someone's comfort level of it being present or accessible to folks here in Minnesota?
Mr. Anglin.
Thank you, Chair. Senator Duckworth. I can't speak to the kiosks at all, but I can speak to whether or not we're getting complaints. Right now, there are complaints rolling in for just about every type of gambling. From, hey, I spent $50,000 last night, to these things are rigged or not rigged. And it's the gambit, whether it's online and social casinos, it's lawful gambling, there's always someone complaining about it's rigged. So same with prediction, which not getting payouts.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Senator Duckworth.
Thank you. So would your agency be the one charged with investigating instances in which there may be fraud occurring as it relates to a prediction market app or business, or would that be somebody else?
Mr. Anglin.
Thank you, Chair. Senator Duckworth. We would be the one investigating. So this is the dilemma. Is it gambling or not? So do we investigate it because it is gambling, but since there's a question, we still look into it because it looks like gambling? So, and we try to be the objective finders of fact, give all the information, and then if we determine that it's not gambling and it's not something that's in our purview, then we will push it onto a financial crimes or someone else.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Senator Duckworth.
So I guess in terms of your organization, have you all had to kind of come up with a determination at this point as to whether or not you view prediction markets as gambling or not, based on what's provided in Minnesota state statute?
Mr. Engel.
Chair, Senator Duckworth, we are currently investigating several, and we're still finding facts, and nothing has been determined as of yet.
One more follow-up, if I may.
Senator Duckworth.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I obviously get that you're in an interesting spot, hence the information that we're receiving today. As it relates to any of the complaints or requests that you all have received to look into specifically prediction markets, upon any of those investigations, whether it be you or maybe some agency that you referred it to, have there been any instances of fraud or people getting ripped off that have been uncovered, or any convictions that have proved that that's the case, to the best of your knowledge?
Mr. Engel.
Chair, Senator Duckworth, as it relates to prediction markets, no, there have been none.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. Further questions from the committee? Thanks for your expertise, Mr. England. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chair, members.
Senator Marty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee.
Welcome to the committee, Senator Marty. Senate File 4511 is in front of us.
Thank you, and I wish I had been here for all of Mr. Anglin's presentation, but he's been very helpful in explaining how the system has worked and so on. And the Senate File 4511 is a bill that I think a year or two ago, most of us wouldn't have had much of a clue of what people were talking about here, and now predictive market betting has grown very quickly, and I'm very afraid it's going to go through the roof if we don't do anything this year. This bill, like many gambling bills, has bipartisan support, and unlike a lot of others, this has support from people on both sides of gambling equation. As you, Mr. Chair, and I and others who may disagree on particular types of gambling, I think there's general agreement. This is looking for, they're claiming to have a loophole in our gambling laws. And in effect, we have had under what are bets, which would be illegal in Minnesota, we exempt under 60975, we exempt certain things like insurance products, futures, trading for commodities and so on, which are established business investment practices that farmers and many others use, and so on. And what this bill would do is say that the prediction markets have taken those future contracts and decided to use them for everything. The name Kalshi apparently means, in Arabic, it means everything. And they're saying you can have futures contracts on everything, and they include, and most, I believe, their market is right now in sports betting. But they have seen, I think you've seen news stories about people making bets on military actions, on things like that. And I believe without this legislation making it clear that this is violation of our gambling laws, that we're going to have that kind of thing here, which causes huge conflicts of interest, insider trading types of problems. In any event, the way the bill works is we would take the prediction markets and suggest that what's now been exempted from bets, what have now been exempted from bets are, under the current case, it's any kind of futures contracts. And we're saying except for those that we spell out, which are, in our mind, gambling. And I would argue already, as Mr. Anglin said, is it gambling or not? Can they enforce or not? This is to clarify their law. Says you're betting on sports, you're betting on these things. That does fall in our definition of bets that would be illegal. So we are basically taking the exemption from what's not a bet that applies to all futures contracts and saying these kinds of futures contracts are actually bets and excluding them. And with this bill, it would make that a felony to do that and that's simply what the bill does. If Senate Council wants to add anything, but the bottom line is we would say, this is illegal here. And that gives Director Anglin and others the ability to tell people, you know, they're doing this, and if you're facilitating the illegal betting, we have a stake to go after you with.
Well, thank you, Senator Marty. And you have one testifier. Members, the plan is to pass this bill to finance if we're able to. Ms. Meeks. Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Klein and Senator Doms and members of the committee. My name is Annette Meeks, and I'm a volunteer board member of Citizens Against Gambling Expansion, Minnesota nonprofit organization that for 15 years has fought many different iterations of gambling expansion in our state. I'm here to offer our strong support for Senator Marty's bill, Senate File 4511. Prediction markets are a wild west of gambling. It's virtually unregulated by our state and should be considered illegal under our existing Minnesota gambling laws. Recent polling showed us that only 21% of all Americans have even heard of Kalshi or Polymarket, two of the largest prediction market platforms, yet these web-based sites were reportedly a market worth $18 billion in wagers in the past year. For those of you unfamiliar, we heard just a great presentation, and I'll spare you some of that, but the most important thing is to understand how different this is and how illegal it is under existing Minnesota state law. The major prediction market platforms have entered mobile sports betting here in Minnesota, where sports gambling still is illegal. They've done so likely because they've seen the lucrative numbers associated with sports betting industry and want a cut of that action. It's estimated today that 90% of all the action on the Kalshi website is sports related. There are a multitude of reasons why our state gambling regulators, and that's you, our state legislature, must step in to stop this purposeful workaround of existing state law. But one of the most important reasons is, as they currently exist, these prediction markets lack appropriate state oversight and any regulation, nor do they offer any state-provided consumer protection. Unlike state-sponsored gambling, such as the lottery, tribal casinos, other legal and regulated forms of gambling, prediction markets are unregulated. They pay zero in state taxes and regulatory fees. That means that the state receives zero revenue from prediction markets, but the state and all 87 counties are left to handle the social pathologies left behind by gamblers who wagers on these websites and then get in trouble. I would also add they allow 18-year-olds, and in all the discussions that have occurred over the last 5 to 6 years about sports betting, mobile sports betting, it's been agreed that Minnesota needs to get our gambling age up to a national standard, which is 21. These are kids gambling in high school on their cell phones. Finally, I would like to add that every country in the world considers prediction markets to be a form of gambling. It's only in the United States where these gambling platforms exist with a wink and a nod, hiding behind their twisted wording that says placing wagers on the Super Bowl, March Madness, and the like isn't sports betting. Regardless of what they call themselves, prediction markets have become a major form of online sports gambling in Minnesota, and you're doing the right thing here today by joining dozens of other states in stopping this illegal and unregulated form of sports betting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Meeks. Member questions, Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Marty, for bringing this forward on a day when I think Minnesota once again visits the topic of gambling. Ms. Meeks, thank you for your comments, especially your comments talking about how we have to have all voices at the table. Not only want to thank your group, want to thank the Minnesota Alliance on Problem Gambling. We cannot move forward without responsible addressing of the downside, which is the addiction, and you correctly point out right now, prediction markets are operating completely Wild West, no help for us of any kind. Also want to say, Mr. Chair, Senator Marty, thank you for mentioning the age. That's a huge issue, and I know some 18-year-olds who could use more than 3 years before they grow up. Don't ask me their names. Welcome further discussion, and Senator Marty, I hope you're able to hang around for the next bill presentation. Thank you, Ms. Meeks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I too appreciate the bill authors' work on this bill, and I think it, for both proponents and opponents of online gambling in Minnesota, this is actually an important bill for us to pass this session. Because if this bill doesn't get passed this session will effectively be seeding this question in a lot of ways. If you look at the companies that are involved in these so-called prediction markets, they advertise themselves as sports betting. They will say that, sports betting is now legal in Minnesota and you can do it through this application. So I think both for those that are proponents of legalizing online gambling in Minnesota and those who are opponents, it's important that the state of Minnesota put a marker in the sand and say that the legislature should be able to debate and look at what forms of gambling we want to legalize and what forms of gambling we want to remain illegal in our state. And I just also wanted to speak, Mr. Chair. I've looked at Senator Marty's bill. I don't think that this would interfere in any way with a functioning financial market. That's something that's important to me. My background before coming to the legislature was as an investor. And I think we do want to make sure that legitimate investing and when people are trying to use markets to mitigate risk, and you can do that through the futures market, you can do that through derivatives contracts, and this is very clearly defining it around athletic events, esports, game of skills, and events that are social in nature and not inherently tied to financial markets.
Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions, if I may. So I guess, Senator Marty, if I could just get your take on this question. Is the predictions market, is it betting or is it not betting?
Senator Marty.
Mr. Chair, Senator Duckworth, in the cases that we're using as example, I think it is betting.
Senator
When
Duckworth.
somebody's betting on the outcome of some natural disaster or betting on who's going to win an election or who's going to win a game, who's going to, any event inside a game or anything, all of that is, in my mind, betting. And you could argue that futures contracts are themselves sort of a, I guess some might call them bets, but we explicitly say they're not bets, and I think farmers and others use it to, as a hedge against crop pricing problems. We don't want to touch the stuff that's been going on. You could argue insurance is a bet. When you, life insurance, how long the person's going to live. So those are all clearly regulated things that have a functional purpose in our society. This is purely for the point of betting. So this bill would define them as clearly as bets, which are regulated under Minnesota laws.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Senator Duckworth.
I guess that's what I'm getting confused about today's conversation. If they are bets, would they not already be regulated by the law that exists currently?
Senator Marty.
And Mr. Chair, Senator Duckworth, what on page 2 of the bill, line 12, you can see what are not bets. Currently, under current law, a contract for purchase or sale at a future date of securities or other commodities, they are basically saying that's exempted from what bets are. And we're saying, well, yes, those are all exempted, except, in effect, these are exceptions to that exemption. And so we are saying if the betting is on, if they're a futures contract or the prediction market is involved in betting on any of the, page 3 of the bill, betting on athletic events, games played with cards, dice, equipment, war, state, national emergencies, events happening to a natural person or group of people, federal, state elections, local elections, or conduct of government, things like that, legal actions. You can't bet on court outcomes. Those would all be exempted, removed from the exception. They would now be covered. So that's what the bill does substantially, is say, we've already exempted futures markets broadly, but now that they're creating this new thing they're calling futures contracts, but they're basically betting, we're saying, no, that is betting. It's clearly a violation of our law, and I think I would see this legislation as basically clarifying our current law.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Senator Duckworth.
And I appreciate that, Senator Marty. I think it's helpful. I guess I can understand why folks are sort of confused as it relates to this topic, because I think sitting here, I've heard that it's betting, it's not betting, it's illegal. Well, actually, it is illegal. It's a part of exceptions, which is why we're trying to remove it as a list of exceptions. And I don't mean to be critical. This isn't criticism. I understand maybe why we're looking for some clarity. I think in some of what you just shared, they were described as contracts. And from my understanding, and a parallel was just made to other investment vehicles or tools. A futures contract is maybe unlike a traditional bet, something that you can actually sell before the event actually even occurs or is complete, much like a piece of stock. We all know the value of stocks go up and down over time for various reasons, also open to manipulation, kind of like what was described earlier. And so knowing that this is something that maybe is currently allowed and we're seeking to add some guardrails to it, does the bill that you're proposing completely ban prediction markets outright, or does it just call for some regulation in which they would still be allowed to exist, however, in a more regulated manner, such as increasing the age limit as was described earlier?
Senator Marty.
Mr. Chair, thank you, and Senator Duckworth. No, this is not regulating them. It's taking this subset of futures contracts and saying, no, these are bets. They're illegal in Minnesota. If you want to have them legal in Minnesota, go through the process we have and have them, we have a licensure process, we have all the stuff in place. These folks are coming in and saying, oh, the federal government regulates futures contracts, which they do. And therefore, so we're not saying, well, you can allow this kind of futures contracts if you put in this or that or something else. We're saying, no, these are bets. These are sports bets. These are bets on politics, other things that are currently illegal. I mean, social bet. You could bet with me or your neighbor or a stranger, anybody, on politics, on sports, anything you want to bet on. Those are private social bets. Those are legal. But if you have some entity coming in and arranging the bets, which the prediction markets are doing, that's illegal. And so we're saying, we want to, this is clarifying the law, saying these things that I think we all recognize are bets, and therefore illegal. And if they want to legalize it, they should come in here and propose whatever kind of protocols they want to have for it.
If I may,
Senator
one
Duckworth.
final question. I appreciate that, Senator Marty, thank you. We're about to have, I think, an informational presentation on sports betting or sports wagering right after this bill. If this bill were to become law, what would its implications be on the future prospects of Minnesota passing a bill that would allow for sports betting or sports wagering?
Senator Marty.
Mr. Chair, Senator Duckworth, I'm not sure this has a lot of impact on it. As I know there are people on both sides of the sports betting debate who are supporting this. And I think that there's reason for that, because this is unregulated, everything else. Those who are carrying those bills are trying to say we should allow this, and that's what the legislative process is for. I don't think this substantially changes that debate.
That's all I've got, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Senator Marty, do you know if other states have passed laws like this?
Mr. Chair, other states have have been going to court saying, hey, this is illegal in our state. And we have the right to regulate our gambling. And so federal government saying, no, you don't have a right to regulate this. We're just simply saying this is a slightly different tack on it. But we're basically saying, we're looking at what these things are, and they're bets. And we're saying, let's define them as not part of the futures contracts that are exempted. But these are clearly bets under our law, and under our law, we should be able to deal with them. So we're not trying to regulate it, but we're trying to clarify that this is outside of that.
One more question, then I know Senator Rasmussen has questions, but I know this bill has passed through the Judiciary Committee, and we won't try to recreate that work. I can watch it online. But I do notice this creates felony penalties. Where did I see it? Yeah, on page 5. For people who create prediction markets, which I assume would be the operators of these large platforms. How did that discussion go in Judiciary, and what's your understanding of how that would operate?
Sure. In terms of, I believe, and Mr. Anglin or Senate Counsel can probably tell you more, but I think that's basically the kind of level we have. If somebody's running an illegal sports book or illegal types of gambling of any sort, I believe that's the type of penalty we've had, the
I got you.
basic felonies. It would be regulated the same way as that. And in this case, the Office of the Alcohol Gambling Enforcement Division would be going out. They would, I think Mr. Anglin's told us he would do letters warning people, you know, we think you might want to take a look at what you're doing. We think it's illegal. and a cease and desist letter if they fail to do so. And then basically it's up to the local prosecutors to prosecute if so. I think the difficulty they have now is they're coming and saying, oh, it's not illegal. So we're trying to make it, that's why I'm saying I think we're clarifying our law on what's illegal bet.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think the questions that Senator Duckworth brought up are good ones in terms of, what is a bet and what is a legitimate future contract. And part of the confusion is coming from these prediction market companies because their marketing department disagrees with their legal department. And I'll just read from one Kalshi ad that is saying that Kalshi is the first app for legal sports betting in all 50 states. That's how they advertised in Minnesota, that they are legal sports betting. So they're telling consumers, they're telling the marketplace that they're a gambling company, but then when they get sued for being a gambling company in court, they come and say, no, 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 we are CFTC preempted futures markets. And my challenge with that is using the prediction markets legal department's logic, they could set up a roulette table and have a prediction market on red or black. And to me, that's very clearly gambling. That's gambling. They're advertising themselves as taking bets on sporting events. And so while it is complicated to try to parse it out, in many ways, these companies have made it somewhat easy for us to tell what is a legitimate futures contract that has financial implications versus where are they trying to take online gambling.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Marty, closing comments.
Mr. Chair and members, I really hope we can pass this bill. I think it's one of the areas where we have some agreement from all sides of the gambling debates that Minnesota has done a good job of regulating gambling, and we have contentious debates over it over the years, and we will continue to. But this is something where somebody's trying to use what they see as a loophole in our laws. I think it's just they're just defining things in a way that aren't accurate. And as Senator Rasmussen pointed out, those ads, saying they claim they're a legal sports book, and they are not. And this would stop that. So I appreciate your support.
Thank you, Senator Marty. The question is on the motion of Senator Rasmussen that Senate File 4511 be recommended to pass and be referred to the Committee on Finance. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is adopted. Thank you, Senator Marty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and
Senator
members of the
Frentz.
committee.
Senator Frentz, Senate File 4139 is not in front of our committee, but we are going to air it out for discussion and edification of the committee. Senator Frentz, Senate File 4139.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members. Pleased to present to you today for informational purposes, Senate File 4139. I want to start by thanking you, Mr. Chair. As you've seen from some other bills today, this is a topic Minnesotans are very interested in. The bill in front of you recognizes humans' interest in gambling. I looked it up last night, and the first physical evidence of gambling is about 7,500 years ago when some dice were made out of some sheep's bones. Thought I'd start my presentation with that. We are watching Americans and people around the world enjoy gambling, and the bill before you would legalize online sports betting and serve that need. Mr. Chair and members, we have a movie industry in this country. We have spectator sports. We have theme parks. We have cruise ships. We have recorded music. Gambling as an industry is larger than all those industries in this country combined. People enjoy gambling, and I'm here to present this bill as part of our discussion. You may have noticed this week, the state of Wisconsin legalized sports betting with tribal exclusivity. Coverage of that, Mr. Chair, included the comment, Wisconsin became the 34th state to legalize online sports betting, quote, following a national trend. Minnesota does not have to do things other states do. But Mr. Chair, if people in other states, if legislatures in other states, if governors in other states prefer a regulated market to an unregulated market, I think we ought to take that into account as we make our decisions. The testimony here today, Mr. Chair, on the other bills means I can skip over part of my outline. But fair to say, there is a great deal of online sports gambling going on in Minnesota right now. Proud to vote yes on Senator Marty's bill. I do not think the federal government should be telling what we in Minnesota can legalize and not legalize. So glad to see that bill move forward. And as a member of the Finance Committee, I'm going to support that bill when it comes to our committee. But at the end of the day, people are telling us they want to do this. Our country went through Prohibition in the 1920s, where the harms of alcohol use were well known: disease, productivity, domestic abuse. And the country's conclusion was to ban alcohol. Members of the Senate Commerce Committee, that did not go well, nor is the banning of sports betting today in Minnesota and America going well. I want to start by acknowledging some of the concerns we have, Mr. Chair. We're worried about people that get addicted to gambling. We're worried about the consequences, economic, emotional, the suicide rate. Of course we care about Minnesotans, and members of the Commerce Committee have voted on many bills in which we must balance the interest of those few against the many. The example that I cited for you a moment ago is alcohol prohibition. The people of the United States of America decided after a few years prohibition was not the best approach, and we now have a regulated, and some would argue, a functioning market for alcohol. That includes protections that are present in Senate File 4139, like age. You must be a certain age to drink alcohol. I believe, Mr. Chair, that's a better approach than simply letting anyone gamble or anyone drink. We have restrictions on how it can be marketed. There are some alcohol advertisements you cannot do. We judge that to be in the public's best interest. This bill includes those restrictions, including a ban on so-called push notices. We are concerned about the health aspects. We don't want people to get sick. We don't want people to become addicted to gambling. The question before us on these bills is, what is in the public interest? What is the greater path? And I have brought with me, Mr. Chair, some testifiers and some letters, but I want to mention one line from one of the letters. Members, in your packet is a letter from the Minnesota Alliance on Problem Gambling. And they are concerned in the same way the rest of us are about the negative impacts on Minnesotans. But this letter cites the presence of over 1,100 illegal social casino sites up and running in Minnesota right now. Members of the Commerce Committee, 1,100 illegal casinos up and running in Minnesota right now. I suggest to you, as members of the legislature, it's incumbent on us to say, does that sound right? Do we not take action when our laws are being violated? And as many of you know, although I don't think any of us were alive during Prohibition, one of the problems that the people of the United States had with Prohibition is that it encouraged and often celebrated lawlessness. Speakeasies, moonshine, bootlegging, organized crime arguably got the biggest boost in its history when we made alcohol illegal, and we are now watching, as other testifiers and other legislators have brought forward, an explosion of illegal gambling. The implications of that are very serious, and Senate File 4139 proposes an alternative to that, which I ask you to consider, which is a well-regulated, thoughtful, and lawful market that protects more Minnesotans. Mr. Chair, I know we have testifiers. I'd like to take just a moment to highlight a couple things from the bill as they get ready to testify. But members, you have the research overview from Senate Council. Among those articles are the protections for problem and compulsive gambling, the exclusivity of the tribal licenses, similar, some would say identical to what the state of Wisconsin did this week. The apportionment of the revenue, I appreciate Ms. Meeks coming forward and saying one of the considerations of the prediction market bill is it's going on and we get no revenue. The bill before you would apportion revenue to our charitable gambling organizations, to youth sports, to Minnesota sports and events. As our state looks at the budget, I think we better ask, are we for economic development? I would suggest that the bringing of sports and events to Minnesota is one thing that's a positive, jobs, experience. Taylor Swift, Mr. Chair, I know your family's got some Taylor Swift fans, 2 concerts. in Minneapolis. The economic impact of those 2 3-hour concerts, $136 million. We have to ask ourselves, do we have an avenue to take advantage of those things with legalized sports betting? Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask the testifiers to come forward now and then take questions and closing remarks. And I
Senator
believe-
Frentz, yeah, before we do the testifiers, I actually have a couple questions as sort of the
Sure.
former author of this legislation. You know, we heard this in the Commerce Committee last year, and what I'm going to ask you in a minute is what's significantly different about it from when we heard it last year. As we passed it out of this committee last year, it had the support of, as you say, the allied charities, the non-opposition of the 2 tracks in Minnesota. It had, you know, disbursement of funds to Department of Human Services to address problem gaming, and of course, the tax rate that we were familiar with. Are those building blocks of this bill the same?
Essentially.
Okay. Any significant differences that you wanted to call out, or?
I guess, members of the committee, I have worked, Mr. Chair, with the Alliance on Problem Gambling. As some of you know, more for spirit than for substance. The first 12 pages of this bill are an attempt to address problem gambling as I understood legislators' concern and advocacy. So that's a bit of a change from last year. The apportionment of the revenue is slightly changed, but essentially it's the same.
Okay. Can I call forward Mr. Plato? Oh, Senator Dames, lead Dames.
Along that line, Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt you. Thank you for that. As you mentioned, last year we heard this bill from Congress. So my concern is we're hearing it now as an information-only bill. But that kind of leads me to wondering if we should be expecting an amendment to your omnibus bill on Thursday to try and amend this into the omnibus bill to move forward through that process. Could you enlighten me on that?
Lead Dames, I can personally answer you as the chair of this committee. I have no intention of amending the omnibus on Thursday. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Dames. I'll echo that sentiment. We're asking for people to take a look, and while the bill has not changed, Senator Dames, I don't expect any amendment. I will flag for this committee that what has changed substantially is the prediction markets and the explosion, their words, not mine, of gambling in the year since we heard it in this committee last time.
Mr. Plato, please introduce yourself and go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Andy Plato. I serve as the Executive Director of the Minnesota Indian Gaming Association, or MIGA. On behalf of our 9 tribal nation members, thank you to Senator Frentz and Chairman Klein for holding this important hearing today. For years, MIGA leaders have together supported a legal, state-regulated mobile sports betting market in Minnesota that respects tribal sovereignty. They have worked in good faith with the legislature and stakeholders to develop a framework built on oversight, both from the state and from tribes, all designed to protect consumers. That goal of better protecting Minnesotans can only be reached after recognition that sports bettors are not well protected today and that something must change. We've always had to guess about the size of the unregulated market, but we're starting to measure it with stock and tax filings of companies currently allowed to operate in the state. That is a frustrating new reality for MIGA tribes who stand by their commitment to offer the activity responsibly and under state rules, something current operators who advertise as legal certainly do not. These concerning industry dynamics have led to a critical decision point here at the Capitol. Does the legislature allow the status quo to continue, where illegal and quasi-legal companies fill the gap without even acknowledging they are gambling products? Or conversely, do you regulate the activity defined in Senator Frentz's bill, which could make Minnesota the national leader in mobile sports betting guardrails and responses to problem gambling concerns? I'll admit that is a bold claim, but I would offer the first 12 pages of the bill as evidence with the key piece found on line 11.25. That section would require the state regulator, the Commissioner of Public Safety in this case, to review other state sports betting laws to ensure we're doing everything working to not only ensure the integrity of the activity, but to also protect Minnesotans who are susceptible to problem gambling. This annual review, resulting in rules, implementations when possible, and legislative recommendations when not, would by design keep the state on the cutting edge of protections, something this committee could all support. Again, thank you to the author, the chair, the committee. MIGA tribes know for certain the status quo is failing Minnesotans and a legal market is badly needed. Please follow the 34 states who've decided that setting the rules and collecting revenues better serve citizens than allowing unregulated products to fill the gap. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Plato. Can you make room for Scott Ward and Cameron Onuma?
Nice job.
Welcome to the committee, Mr. Cameron and Mr. Onuma. Whoever wants to go first, please introduce yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Cameron Onuma. I serve as a policy director for the Sports Betting Alliance. Our members, FanDuel, DraftKings, Fanatics Betting and Gaming, Bet365, and BetMGM, operate the lion's share of licensed, regulated sports betting platforms across 39 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. Appreciate the opportunity to present before the committee today. Minnesota is one of the few remaining states without legal sports betting. That does not mean, as has been laid out here today, that Minnesotans are not betting. According to a 2025 study, an estimated $1.5 to $3.8 billion is wagered annually through illegal markets here in Minnesota, making it one of the largest unregulated markets in the country. At the same time, we are seeing real-world behavior that reinforces this. In just the past 30 days with March Madness, we have seen hundreds of thousands of attempted geolocation transactions from Minnesotans trying to access legal sports books, with the majority doing so along the Iowa border. So the question comes before the committee whether or not, the question before the committee is not whether sports betting exists in Minnesota. It is whether it exists in a regulated market that protects consumers, delivers tax revenue back to the state, or we continue with an illegal market that does none of that. This bill answers that question. It establishes a tribal-led framework authorizing up to 11 licenses for tribes currently operating Class 3 gaming. It creates a regulated market with clear oversight and directs tax revenue towards priorities including charitable tax relief, youth sports, responsible gaming, and sports integrity. Just as important as where revenue goes is how the market is built. And this is what's so unique about what we're doing here in Minnesota. Before launch, the bill will require a baseline study on gambling prevalence with ongoing updates and additional research into problem gambling, youth risk, and public health impacts. That level of front-end accountability is what the regulated industry stands for. The consumer protections in this bill reflect what works across the country. Strict age identification, 21 plus, geolocation, deposit and wagering limits, and self-exclusion. These protections exist only in a regulated market. They do not exist on Bovada. They do not exist on Bet Online. They do not exist in the many offshore and unregulated platforms currently operating in this state. The reality is simple. Minnesotans are already participating in the market. This bill brings that activity into a regulated system that protects consumers, respects tribal sovereignty, delivers tax revenue, and ensures accountability to you, the legislature. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague.
Thank you. Mr. Cameron, I think you might have a presentation. Let me know when you're ready.
Can you, is that showing?
It's not. Showing now.
It's showing now?
Sorry, Mr. Ward. I called you Mr. Cameron. Mr. Ward, please
Okay, you can
introduce
see my
yourself.
screen?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chairman, Scott Ward, I'm with Oric Harrington Sutcliffe here today on behalf of my clients, DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, Bet365, and Fanatics Betting and Gaming. We've talked, I think, going on 6 years now here in the state about legalizing online sports betting. Much of that talk has centered on the basis, which you heard from the testifier from the regulator earlier, that it's existing today. It exists in the offshore, and I think the quote from earlier today was that offshore sports books are a problem. I think he also said they counted 3,800 different sites that Minnesotans could bet on sports currently in the state of Minnesota. So instead of continuing to say that to you, I thought I'd show it to you. And that's what this is. Before you right now is a website called mybookie.ag. It's located in Costa Rica, but it's actually the AG means it's a website from Antigua. Because of time constraints, I'm not going to show you how I signed up for it, but as you can see in the top right corner, I am signed into this website, and I have deposited some money into it. I can tell you that to sign up for this website, I had to give my phone number, an email address, as well as my residence. I live in the state of Tennessee. Interestingly, it would not take a zip code from Tennessee, but I entered 55155, which many of you will recognize as the zip code for where we're sitting right here today, and it did accept that. It also asked me for my birthday, and I first put in a date that was under 18, and it simply said you must enter a date over 18, which I did, and then it accepted it without further verification. I deposited money onto this website. I used a credit card that has a Tennessee address, and it accepted it despite the previous prohibition on a Tennessee zip code. So here we are. We are in mybookie.ag. As you can see from it, it looks like a regular sports book. I can assure you that Major League Baseball is not happy about the fact that they're using their trademarks here for all of these teams, but you can bet on just about any sport. Baseball, NBA, PGA Tour. I was going to show you here, we can bet on the Minnesota Twins tonight. They're plus 115 to win tonight against the Red Sox. So I'd simply push this button, open my bet slip. There it is. I enter, let's say $5. I would win $5.75 if this bet were to win. I could also add another game to it. Let's say I want to add the Braves at minus 1.5 runs. I now have two bets, or what's called a parlay. I bet $5 there, and now I'd win $19.51 to make that bet. As you go into here, if I clicked on, let me X that out. If I clicked on this game, you can see that I can also, loading, I can also make bets on particular props, pitcher props, other types of props, hitting props, all that sort of stuff. I'll show you that in just a second. It's having a little trouble loading as I sit here right now. Now, I did not push the bet button, that green bet button. The reason I didn't do that is because I've been advised that that might be a misdemeanor here in the state of Minnesota. So I'm not going to do that in front of all you and on video camera and all those sorts of things. Having said that, I did, just to prove to you that it works, I did make those bets before I came here today. And as you can see, I bet on the Twins to win tonight. I'll win a whopping $4.50 or $5.75 on my $5 bet. I bet on the Timberwolves to win next week. And I made a prop bet on 2 Timberwolves players to score over points. So this works in Minnesota. Anybody who wants to bet on sports can use this. It's not just this, by the way, I should, before I go away from this, note at the top, casino, live casino. This is not just a sports betting app. This is a casino app. You can play slots. You can play blackjack. You can do all sorts of casino games on here. Just as easy as I just showed you, you can do a sports book bet as well. Let's move to the next one. Bet Online is also a Costa Rican sports book with a Antigua website. I've shown here, I've already created a 2-leg parlay for Byron Buxton to get a hit tonight for the Twins, as well as Josh Bell to get a home run. A $100 bet there would be $700. I have not logged in or joined this one. I decided to sacrifice my personal information for only one website for this presentation. So for the rest of them, I didn't do that. But I can assure you that this one and the remaining ones, it's the same process to sign up. To be fair, one of them would have required me to upload a picture of my driver's license, but the others did not. Bovada. We've all heard about Bovada. This is the most popular one. It's out there. People know about it. So this is Bovada. As you can see, you can bet on college baseball on Bovada. Going straight down the list, all these various, there's 25 different games you can bet on. What I thought was interesting that you might want to see is in the Bovada terms of services, you can see this is Bovada, and I'm going to make this larger for you. It does list what states they do not offer their service in. There's 21 states listed there. There's one thing in common about all 21 of those states. All of them have a legal and regulated state-regulated sports betting product. So just like Minnesota, where the Attorney General sent a cease and desist letter to Bovada last fall, these states did that too. And they listened to them for these states. Now, look, Are they actually not letting you use this in the state of Tennessee, my home state? I don't know. I can't tell you. I didn't try. Maybe not. Maybe use a VPN, you can do it. But Minnesota is not on this list. They've ignored that cease and desist from your Attorney General because the economic interest in the state's too great. In these states, they have competition from a legal and regulated industry. Here in Minnesota, they don't, and they continue to offer their product in Minnesota. Moving on, and I'll end quickly. BetUS is one of my favorites just because of the name, BetUS. BetUS is located in Panama, but it's the same exact thing. You can see, you can make props, you can bet on all kinds of sports. Here's college baseball. It's also a casino. Lucky Rebel Sportsbook is one that I like to use when I'm in Alabama or Mississippi talking about this topic. As you can imagine, they are dismayed to hear that Lucky Rebel is actually located in Malawi, which I might not have said that right. If you didn't know where that is, I didn't either. It's an island off the coast of Madagascar. But as you can see, you can bet on college baseball, you can bet on soccer, you can bet on all sorts of things, and it's also a casino. Finally, there's XBet, very similar product. These are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 offshore sports books I'm showing you. All of them are available to Minnesota residents to bet on today. As you heard, there are 3,800 various things. I'm not going to go through them all. I also have here 2 sweepstakes sites, which really work on your phone. And then, of course, Kalshi, which I have listed up here. Lacrosse, college lacrosse, if you wanted to place a prediction on those. I'll end it there, in just the time for the committee. Just to close, I would like to say that I recognize that the debate on online sports betting is really a debate worrying about harms. I'd like to echo Senator Frentz's comment about we're all concerned about the negative consequences of online sports betting. But a vote to legalize online sports betting would do just that. A vote to not legalize sports betting is not going to stop those harms. Those harms are already here. They're already happening in this state. So legalizing sports betting would mitigate those harms. Not legalizing sports betting would just simply let those harms go completely untouched with no help whatsoever. Thank you.
Stay where you are for a second. Mr. Ward, Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and this can go to Mr. Ward and Mr. Onuma. It's your position that legalizing online sports betting would make consumers, let me take a step back. So we've talked about problem gambling. And if Minnesota were to legalize online sports gambling, would we expect to see an increase in problem gambling in our state or a decrease in problem gambling in our state from your point of view?
Mr. Ward.
Mr. Chairman. Senator, thank you for the question. So there are plenty of studies. I'm sure you've read them just as I have. The incidence of serious problem gambling has remained 1 to 2% across adults for quite some time. There's a Connecticut study that is a tracking study in Connecticut that shows that that's been doing this since 2008, that has maintained that 1 to 2% of adults for severe problem gambling all the way till 2024. Connecticut has both online sports betting and online casino legal in those states. So that has not changed. So will that 1 to 2% stay the same in Minnesota if you legalized online sports betting? Yes, I do believe it will. Now, the other thing that will happen is that you will start to crowd out all these sites I just said. Bovada would have a reason to actually listen to that cease and desist and no longer operate in the state. You would also give folks who want to do this the ability to do it legally and remove a stigma that they may have if they do have a problem to seek help because they're not doing something illegally. I think those are all real benefits to legalizing sports betting.
Mr.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Moore. I guess just to make my question clear, if Minnesota, if the legislature were to legalize online sports gambling, would the people of Minnesota, should the people of Minnesota expect the prevalence of problem gambling to increase in our state or decrease in our state? From your point of view.
Mr. Chairman, I think my previous answer, I'll stand by that, that studies have shown that in states that have online sports betting or not, that the incidence remains at 1 to 2%.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll put a pin in that. We're going to come back to it. Mr. Ward, we're talking about online sports betting today, but the companies that you represent also have casinos, right, that have slots, blackjack on people's phones. Would you use the exact same arguments for why states should legalize full-on gambling, mobile gambling, as you've used today for sports betting?
Mr. Ward.
Mr. Chairman, I'm here advocating for legal online sports betting. We're not talking about legal casinos. As I showed you, those sites I showed you all offer that product. It exists today, and there are hundreds of thousands of Minnesota using those, but I'm not advocating for that today. The states that have done that have seen significant tax revenue from it, and as I mentioned, Connecticut has both, and their studies have shown that those rates have remained the same.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One additional question. There's been this, from the testifiers today, this assertion that by legalizing online gambling, that we will see illegal gambling decrease or go away. And I was wondering, Mr. Ward, is there any research that you can point to that shows that illegal gambling goes down in states that have legalized this?
Mr. Ward.
Oh, you go first, please.
Senator Frentz or Mr. Ward?
I'll go second.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So it's a two-step process. When you legalize, as I mentioned, all these sites are here. They have no incentive to leave the state because there's nobody competing against them, except for each other site. When you legalize sports betting, you are creating a legal and regulated market that is taxed and safe for consumers in the state. People would rather do something legally than illegally, and they will move to that site. We know this from the geo-compliant numbers that you heard my colleague give earlier, with hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans trying to get on legal sports books already, even though they're not legal. They will move to these sites because it's safer, it's better for them, and it's known to be legal now. The second step is, so you're starving those illegal sites of customers. The second step is, of course, now the Attorney General and others, and it's in this bill as well, has more teeth to go after them. And then you can try to get them out of the state. Will all illegal gambling leave the state? No, of course not. It won't. Money like water, finds a way, and they will find a way to continue operating. But what we've seen from anecdotal studies in other states is that the estimates of illegal gambling go significantly down in states that have online sports betting, even more so on states that have both online sports betting and online casino, compared to those that have none of it.
Senator Frentz. And we have one more testifier, and we're going to try to wrap this up by about 2 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Rasmussen. I join you in the questions and concerns about the negatives of gambling, but your question is a good one. How do we know there's going to be less illegal gambling? And I offer you two responses. First of all, I don't see a lot of illegal alcohol sales in the state of Minnesota. We have legalized and regulated, and I don't know the last time someone bought an illegal six-pack or an illegal keg. I offer you just as an example, Senator, of how regulation can reduce the illegal behavior. And also note that the bill contains 35 FTEs for the Department of Public Safety to help with the enforcement by the Attorney General. Mr. Chair, I know you said don't come here without hard, cold facts. I believe it's the state of Mississippi, don't promise, that once they passed a regulatory framework like this, successfully kicked out a large number of illegal operators. So again, Senator Rasmussen, I think you are on a very important question. I offer you those two things to consider in your concerns about whether this would in fact reduce illegal sites and illegal gambling. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Rasmussen, and then Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just try to, and I appreciate the conversation. I just want to kind of wrap up this point because I think it's the key argument that proponents are making as why Minnesotans should set aside concerns around problem gambling to legalize online gambling. And I asked a series of questions on will this increase or decrease problem gambling. From my point of view, didn't really get a straight answer from the testifier, but the research is actually quite clear. This has effectively been a national social experiment where some states have legalized gambling, some states have not, some have legalized online gambling, others have not. And when I'll just point to a recent article that was in NPR from April 4th of this year, the headline is, "When Legal Sports Betting Surges, So Do Americans' Financial Problems." And they talk about both a Federal Reserve study and a research report that was done by UCLA. And I'll just read one of the excerpts from that study. We find a substantial increase in average bankruptcy rates, debt sent to collections, use of debt consolidation loans, and auto loan delinquencies. Together, these results indicate that the ease of access to sports gambling is harming consumer financial health by increasing their level of debt. And so if legalizing and regulating online sports gambling was going to make Minnesotans safer, we would expect those financial metrics to improve. But instead, when states legalize online gambling, credit scores go down, bankruptcies go up, delinquencies go up, financial health goes down. And if what the proponents were saying about this bill were true, we would actually see improvement in problem gambling outcomes, but instead we just see more gambling. And I didn't hear research or studies that were cited about how this could make the illegal market go away. But the state of Massachusetts, which has legalized online gambling, their gambling regulator has very clearly said that they haven't really seen the illegal market go away in Massachusetts. They just see more gambling. And I'll also just point out, Mr. Chair, that the same companies that are here testifying today, they use the exact same arguments for why we should have slots, roulette, blackjack on Minnesotans' phones. And you can go and see they are making that case in states that have already legalized online sports gambling to now do full iCasinos. And so I do think there's a limit to this argument, and it's not borne out in the facts. When you legalize online gambling, you just get more gambling. You get more problem gambling, and the illegal problems, illegal markets don't go away. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Duckworth.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm going to heed your warning, and I'll just ask one question, then maybe just have a couple comments at the very end, if that's okay. Question relates to what the gentleman showed us online earlier. I think it was the first app he showed, My Bookie, where you'd already placed a bet on the Twins. It hopefully does pan out later today, not just for you, but for all of us. We'd like to see the Twins succeed. It looked like what you had actually placed a bet on, or what you'd actually purchased, was a prediction markets product. Was that the case, or am I wrong about that? I saw you had the ability to cash out.
Mr. Ward.
Mr. Chairman, no, it's a sports book. They do allow, and many sports book do, both in the offshore and legal market, they do allow you to cash out. It allowed me for cash out for obviously the game has not started yet. There's no difference in what's happened. I made a $5 bet. It would have allowed me to cash out, I think, at $4.50 or something like that. So I'm still losing money. But that is allowed in offshore books, state regulated books, like my clients offer that as well. So it was a straight sports betting product. It was not a prediction market.
Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the state of Minnesota were to somehow try to distinguish between online betting and predictions, a predictions market, in your opinion, is that even something that's feasible or doable? Or if the bill that was heard just before this informational session were to pass, would it sort of seal the fate when it comes to online betting or online wagering in the state in and of itself?
Mr. Ward.
Mr. Chairman, without going too far afield, there are significant differences, behind the website, if you will, in terms of how prediction markets work related to sports betting. I believe you or somebody else has suggested in sports betting you have the house, and prediction markets there are people on either side of that transaction with an entity that's holding that transaction for them. Those are significant legal debates about that. And I think we are up to 13 different state or federal court cases that are debating that exact topic. And so I will leave to them. That is where that decision is going to be made by us, by the Supreme Court, frankly, and not by any state legislature as to what's going to happen there. I would tell you that in states where sports books are operating now, state-regulated sports books, which my clients support, and there are also prediction markets, it's not even close. Consumers prefer the state-regulated sports book over those prediction markets. In states like California and Minnesota that have not offered state-regulated sports books as a product for the consumers, then those prediction markets are running rampant in those states.
Senator Duckworth. Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Rasmussen did hit on all the points that I was going to bring up as far as the amount of increases in mine. It said massive increases. And it also gave some numbers on the amount of billions of dollars that this brings in tax revenue. But that's also a problem because I never cared for the fact that we as senators or representatives sit here and look at the people we're supposed to be serving as how much money can we get from them to fund our projects. It's not a good policy. I do have a question, and it goes back to Senator Dames's comments earlier, is that this would not be added on to your bill, and that's fine. But seeing as how we're hearing this in committee and not passing it on, is there still an avenue for it to go to the floor without coming back to this committee?
There is not, Senator Green.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Rebecca Delahunt.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Well done. Good luck.
Thank you.
Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Klein, Senator Frentz, and members of the committee. My name is Rebecca Delahunt, and I work as Director of Public Policy with Minnesota Family Council. We're opposed to SF 4139. The industry is seeking a legal framework which would support massive growth, likely accruing millions or even billions of dollars in revenue, a wealth transfer away from Minnesota families to international gaming companies. Legalization would allow for a sportsbook on every adult cell phone. A study released yesterday by Siena Research Institute found that 85% of online sports bettors say they bet because they thought they could make money, likely influenced by massive advertising campaigns. But 2024 research from Southern Methodist University, Emory University, and UC San Diego found that less than 5% of sports gamblers are observed to be net winners. Addiction caused by the design of the mobile sports gambling platforms results in community breakdown. UCLA and USC research has measured that online sports gambling increases the likelihood of household bankruptcy by as much as 25 to 30% after 3 to 4 years of legalization. I think Senator Rasmussen referenced this study earlier. The responsibility to clean up the financial and social costs from these companies' business model is most often paid for by families, the state, churches, and faith communities. Proponents claim that the industry should be legalized because people bet regardless of the legal status here in Minnesota. But we argue that the answer to illegal gambling is not to expand this industry, but instead to work toward crackdown of illegal sites. In November last year, Governor Mike DeWine told the Associated Press that Ohio should not have legalized mobile sports betting. Minnesota is not obligated to create a statutory platform for online betting for the few Minnesotans who can afford to absorb their gambling losses. Policy decisions, as mentioned earlier, must weigh competing interests, and surely the consumer protection of Minnesota families from companies built on a consumer fraud scheme should be a priority. According to the bill language, 80% of tax revenue collected goes back to gambling interests, 15% for sports marketing fund, just 4% for gambling addiction, and 1% for amateur sports integrity. When very few people make money off their bets and 80% of the tax revenue collected would be shared by various gambling interests, we know who loses from legalization: average Minnesotans and their families. Thank you for hearing me today.
Thank you so much. Senator Frentz, do you have any very brief closing comments? And then we're going to go to.
No, but I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for creating some space for this. I want to thank you, members, for considering it. I think we have touched on the issues, both pro and con, and I look forward to a further discussion. I would like to just close, Mr. Chair, by pointing out states around the country are asking what is the proper management of this issue. The state of Wisconsin is not the same as us, but they're not different. And yesterday, Governor Evers signed this bill, and all the arguments that have been made were presented in the state of Wisconsin, and the best judgment of that legislature, Mr. Chair, was to legalize and regulate. I also want to mention for the first time that we have made a promise to our Native American tribes that we would not allow an expansion of gambling, and they consider this to be an expansion that we're standing by and watching happen. For those reasons, I realize this bill is not going anywhere this year, but I hope everybody on both sides of the issue will join in having a further conversation. And Senator Rasmussen, you have my marker to join you and Senator Marty in that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members.
Thank you, Senator Frentz. Just stay there for a second. I guess we had a couple more members who had brief comments. Sorry to go after you. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank you, Senator Frentz. The analogy has been made between gambling and alcohol prohibition. And I just want to point one thing that why I view this differently. We had in 2024, the Wall Street Journal found that for one of the companies that came and presented here today, that 70% of their profits came from fewer than 1% of its users. And if the Applebee's in Fergus Falls made 70% of their alcohol sales from 1% of their customers, we'd take their liquor license away. This is an industry that is predicated on problem gambling. That's where the money comes from. And as Americans have looked through this social experiment, it is becoming less popular. We have, from October of last year, a Pew Research study, not a push poll from an advocate or an opponent, but the headline is, on October 2nd, Americans increasingly see legal sports betting as a bad thing for society and sports. And if you look at the individuals who are actually engaging in the most sports betting, which is young men, today, this is a quote from the report, today 47% of men under 30 say legal sports betting is a bad thing for society, up from 22% who said this in 2022. And Mr. Chair, I'm very thankful that Minnesota did not rush into legalizing online gambling here in our state, because it's allowed us the opportunity to see the research from other states. And I think the conclusions are quite clear. And as this conversation continues, I just think we need to continue to look to the research, to look to the examples in other states to make sure that we're aware of the problems. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Duckworth.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I promise to be brief. If I go too long, just give me the wrap-up signal. Just a reminder that one of the first things we did at committee today was increase the parameters for meat raffling. What's interesting to me is I think this conversation would make a lot more sense if we were talking about whether or not we were going to legalize gambling or not, period, in the state of Minnesota, but that's not the conversation we're having. There are some forms of gambling, a lot of them, that are already legal here in the state of Minnesota, and they're regulated. Whether it's the lottery, the meat raffle, pull tabs, you name it. So we're not having a conversation about whether or not gambling or betting is right or wrong or legal or illegal. What we're having a conversation about is which forms of it are and which forms should be regulated or not regulated. You know, what's interesting to me is we had a bill before us earlier that kind of, most people said, well, yeah, we should probably make that illegal or ban it. And now we have a similar concept in front of us where some people are saying, well, this is one that we should support. And I think everybody's left wondering, well, which is it? What's legal, what's not? What are we going to regulate, what aren't we going to regulate? Well, should we ban it or shouldn't we ban it? Should we treat it like other forms of gambling or not? And I think potentially regarding that other bill, if that were to become law in the state of Minnesota, I think it's going to make the decision regarding sports betting or sports wagering online. And it's going to ensure that it never becomes an option for folks here in the state that would like to see it become an option. That's what I think that passing that bill will ultimately mean. And your thoughts on it may be what it is. I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other. But I don't think you can be in support of banning predictions markets, but then support online sports betting or wagering. Many people just made the argument today that they're one and the same. And so if we're going to do that, then we have to have a full understanding of the laws that are before us and that moved in this committee today and the ones that we're only having an informational hearing on for a reason. Either you ban it all, or you legalize them, you regulate them, and you allow folks to do them safely, and you allow them to exercise their own judgment how they see fit. And so all that to say, you know, if we're going to go one route versus the other, there might be something to be said for having it be legal, having it be regulated, and although we don't exist to collect taxes or revenue on our citizens, I agree with Senator Green on that. It would obviously be an option if it were something that were regulated and controlled by the state versus what it is now currently. I also think it's a little bit ironic that we're preaching about regulating industries when the state of Minnesota doesn't necessarily have the best track record right now when it comes to regulating or overseeing funds. That's a whole nother issue. So that being said, Mr. Chair, I do appreciate a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. Thank you, Senator Frentz. Chair Seeberger has the gavel.
Senator Klein, to your bill, Senate File 5046.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll have the bill presented by Commissioner Arnold.
Commissioner Arnold, welcome to the committee. Can you give us a walkthrough of this bill?
I can. Yeah, so Chair Seeberger, Chair Klein, members of the committee, I won't take offense to all the folks who are leaving. This is an exciting and thrilling set of proposals that I'd like to present today. For those who aren't aware, I'm Grace Arnold. I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Commerce. I'm here to testify on the department's supplemental budget bill. This bill includes just a few things, all of which are budget neutral, and reflect our priorities for this session in the budget space. So the first is to move oversight of HMOs from the Department of Health to the Department of Commerce. The second is some policy changes governing non-depository institutions that have a very small licensing revenue impact that's not general fund impact, but it's a plus minus on a spreadsheet. So here we are. Some technical changes to the state's reinsurance program, and then a repeal of the Prescription Drug Advisory Council. So I'll start by walking through the health insurance provisions. So as most of you know, or as all of you know, health insurance continues to be more expensive and unnecessarily complicated for everyday Minnesotans to navigate. It used to be said that an individual or a family without healthcare coverage was one accident or illness away from financial ruin. And now even those with coverage are facing insurmountable costs when someone becomes ill, or at the very least, they face a confusing set of network restrictions, prior authorization requirements, and other challenges that make it really difficult for people to use the insurance that they have. This is happening in an environment where insurance companies, and particularly smaller and local carriers, are under tremendous pressure. Lost premium tax credits from the federal government, significant medical assistance and Medicare cuts, and other market dynamics really continue to balloon costs. Minnesota is one of the only states in the country that doesn't regulate HMOs under a Department of Commerce or insurance. Minnesota is also the only state that does not at least divide HMO oversight between their equivalent of the Department of Health and Commerce. And this has led to confusion for consumers and insurers and diminishes the collective effectiveness in ensuring we have a competitive insurance market and in supporting Minnesotans who have problems with their insurance company. Finally, it's not realistic to expect Minnesota families to shuffle between multiple agencies to get the support that they need in navigating the private insurance market. These market conditions have forced us to reflect on how state regulates the insurance markets, and we believe that the changes are needed to ensure enhanced and aligned oversight of health insurance companies in Minnesota. So our proposal is to transfer HMO oversight to the Department of Commerce from the Department of Health. Having one agency responsible for regulating private health insurance, HMOs and non-HMOs, will streamline, clarify, and enhance private insurance coverage oversight, create a more efficient and proactive regulatory structure, and create, I'd say perhaps most importantly, create a single place for Minnesotans to go if they need help with their private insurance coverage. Also lowers administrative and compliance complexity for insurers because they have only one agency to talk to. Beyond the efficiencies to be gained by the consolidation, the department is seeking some enhanced notification requirements when a health insurer experiences enrollment spikes, as well as controls governing executive compensation and bonuses when a health plan is no longer financially viable. This simplified regulatory structure will also remove barriers to consumers in navigating the insurance system. So there are some subtle differences between HMOs and non-HMO coverage. These distinctions are certainly not transparent to consumers who often bounce back and forth between the Departments of Health and Commerce when they're seeking support. Under this proposal, the Department of Commerce will be a one-stop shop for customer complaints in the private insurance space. We expect this to ease consumer confusion and improve our ability to enforce important priorities like mental health parity. So I'll move now to our non-depository institutions article. This may be the article that sent everyone out of the building, I'm not sure. This bill updates several statutes governing our non-depository financial institutions to reflect modern lending practices. It clarifies the type of license that's needed for those who arrange consumer short-term loans, removes unnecessary dual licensure requirements for mortgage loan originators making junior lien loans, and allows sales finance companies to charge late fees when motor vehicle loans become delinquent. The bill also aligns the net worth value standard for virtual currency licensees with accounting rules, removes outdated accreditation requirements for debt management providers, and closes a licensing loophole for entities that arrange payday loans. Finally, it requires lenders offering services online to display their licensing information and makes some technical corrections to outdated statutory language. We're also recommending technical and date adjustments to the reinsurance program. This proposal does not substantively alter the compromise that was reached last session. Instead, it makes narrow and targeted changes to simplify the administration of the program as we transition to an assessment-based financing mechanism. Finally, we are proposing the elimination of the Prescription Drug Advisory Council. This Prescription Drug Affordability Board will remain in place and offers numerous opportunities for the public to weigh in on their work, and we expect this to continue without the PDAC in place. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time today, and I am more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Arnold. Any questions or comments from members of the committee? Senator Wickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about how you see the consumer benefits of this alignment relating to enforcement of mental health parity, and then the other sort of consumer side items that relate to access to networks, things like that. If you could, can you comment some more about how you see this plan being a positive change for consumers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Commissioner Arnold.
Chair Seeberger and Senator Wickland, absolutely. So I think a very simple one is that we now have 2 places that a consumer can go if you have coverage, if you have an issue with your coverage. And consumers have to figure out whether they have an HMO or a non-HMO. I would guess that all of you, if you looked at your coverage, would not be able to tell me whether or not you have an HMO or not, but you may have one or the other. I think that's true of most folks. So being able to just channel to one call line, I think, is probably the simplest thing. That is also, all the processes that then go beyond that. So if you have an appeal with your insurance company, if you're having a claims issue, each of those things mean that you are getting an answer from the same set of people. I think in theory, it's possible that we in the Department of Health give different answers sometimes, or we have different standards for the way that we respond. And not because anyone's not doing their job, but just because there are different teams doing it. And so that is simpler and more consistent for consumers. I think the mental health parity one is another one. So we have, over the course of the last several years, entered into agreements with most of the carriers in the state, at least the large ones, to improve their provision of mental health coverage for a variety of reasons. And mental health parity is a fairly complicated law, but we have agreements in place for them to work on better meeting those standards. Those agreements are only in place with insurance non-HMOs because it's something that the Department of Commerce has done. In having them together, then we can take on that type of enforcement activity as a whole instead of having half the market. I think process-wise, people probably get a lot of the benefit, but half the market is in theory not covered by those consent orders. And so those are the kinds of things where there are gaps that are not because one agency is doing their job or not because the regulations, but just because there are 2 different teams doing the work, and doing them together provides more consistency for consumers, better protection for consumers, and then it's just easier. Like, health insurance is super complicated. We don't need to make it harder than it already is.
Senator Wickland.
And then I know that today, the Department of Health has some responsibilities that are not financial or necessarily that type of responsibility, but they have like a quality and a quality sort of oversight. And I'm just wondering, that seems like it lends itself more to the Department of Health's responsibilities, but maybe can you tell me how your organization would, or your agency would be able to take on that role as well? Thanks.
Commissioner Arnold.
Chair Seeberger and Senator Wickland, that's a great question. So I think one set of questions is I think about the relative specialty that MDH has with networks. So they do network adequacy review for all. So I think another reason for thinking about this is we currently contract back and forth with each other for work. So MDH does all of the network adequacy reviews, and we do all of the actuarial and financial reviews. And so those relative expertises already exist in each agency, and then combining them just means we don't have to do the contracting back and forth, which is an administrative sort of extra that we do as part of our current work. There are certainly things, so if you think about something like essential community providers, so MDH licenses those, the evaluation of whether or not they should be a network or the way that they are a network in plans according to statute would come over to the Department of Commerce. So those are the kinds of things where, that work will come to the Department of Commerce. There are certain functions that would remain with MDH. The quality, so there's a requirement for some quality monitoring. I think, that's something that would come over to the Department of Commerce. That is definitely something I would envision that is, it's sort of an existential part of the healthcare system, just like the way that, Medicaid finances or Medicaid trends impact their finances. And so those are interagency conversations that we already have. And I think will be bolstered by an ability to focus a little bit more within commerce on their insurance regulation portion, and then within health on the other portions that are particularly related to providers and, DHS with the Medicaid book. And so each of those agencies already work and are sharing information together. I think making sure that we are kind of aligning relative areas of expertise and are able to focus will strengthen each team's ability to do that work rather than being spread kind of across the two agencies and each agency having similar people doing similar jobs, and instead of one person really focusing and then adding capacity to do additional quality review or something like that.
Senator Wickland? Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Senator Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was looking through some parts of the bill, and I have to say it's kind of confusing sometimes, but the prescription drug portion of it, there was supposed to be a report done, and apparently it hasn't been completed. And my information is that the Prescription Drug Affordability Board was supposed to be meeting maybe today. Is there any word on whether or not that report is forthcoming, or are they working on it for the affordability part?
Commissioner Arnold?
Chair Seeberger and Senator Green, I'm not, I don't know what specifically you're referring to, but if you can send that information to Sam, we can get back to you. I will say the Prescription Drug Affordability Board is, we sort of help to incubate it, but it's an independent entity that does their work independently of the Department of Commerce. And so while we are sort of, the budget lives within the Commerce Committee and originally started as a, we helped with the hiring and those kinds of things, now it is, on its own and as it was intended to be an independent entity. But we can help facilitate an answer to that question if you can provide a little more detail.
Senator Green?
Maybe we could talk on that, because I can't have a really hard time hearing what you're saying. No, don't even know if I got half of that, and I don't want to waste too much more time. But I did see that, is it true that there's parts of this bill that the Supreme Court has ruled unconstitutional as far as on the drug portion?
Commissioner Arnold?
Chair Seeberger and Senator Green, I know there have been Supreme Court rulings about the generally prescription drug affordability boards. I'm not aware of one that's specific to the one here in Minnesota.
Senator Green? Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Senator Klein, any closing thoughts?
Chair, I'll make a motion. I move that Senate File 5046 be recommended to pass and refer to the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety.
On Senator Klein's motion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The motion prevails. The motion prevails. And the bill is on its way to Judiciary. I'm sorry, Senator Flatts. Thank you, Commissioner Arnold and Mr. Smith. Next up, Senator Klein, your bill, Senate File 4365.
Thank you, Chair and members. And this is the Omnibus Commerce Policy and Finance Bill for this year. We will walk through it in a moment with council, and then we'll adjourn and can take it up for amendments on Thursday. And with that, I can turn it over to council. Oh,
Mr. Di-
sorry. I have an author's amendment. Madam Chair, I offer the A4 as an author's amendment.
Senator Klein offers the A4 as an author's amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. All right, who's Mr. Della?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I know we're a bit short on time, so I'll try to walk through the A4 delete everything amendment fairly quickly, but as always, me and my colleagues are available for questions. I would also note that right now, an index of the bill is being passed out to members that identifies the sources of the language that's included in the amendment, a summary of each of the proposals included, and then the sections where they are located in the amendment. This walkthrough will largely track that index, but hopefully we can add a few additional useful details, and then we will also plan to indicate where language has been modified since the last time the language was heard in a Senate committee. Starting with Article 1, that article is solely comprised of Article 1 that was in the governor's bill that we just heard, Senate File 5046. It appropriates general fund money to the Department of Commerce for the regulation of HMOs and county-based purchasers. Section 2 in that article then reduces the Department of Health's appropriations to account for that shift. Article 2 similarly matches the corresponding Article 2 from Senate File 5046. It eliminates the Prescription Drug Affordability Advisory Council and then makes related conforming changes. There are two repealers in this proposal. To preempt any questions that might possibly come my way, one of those repealers repeals the definition of Prescription Drug Affordability Advisory Council, and the other one repeals the section establishing and governing that advisory council.
Article 3 is also the same article from Senate File 5046. The language here relates to non-depository institutions, including modifications to residential mortgage originators and servicers, and clarifies when a licensee engaged in virtual currency business activities may include virtual currency in the licensee's total assets for the calculation of the licensee's tangible net worth.
As with Articles 1 through 3, Article 4, which is titled Health Plan Regulatory Alignment, matches the corresponding article in Senate File 5046. It does contain several distinct pieces, though, so I'm planning to go through those in a bit more detail. Specifically, Sections 1 and 23 require health insurers, nonprofit health service plan corporations, so that's basically Blue Cross, and health maintenance organizations, to notify the Commissioner of Commerce if the entity experiences a significant increase in total enrollees across the entity or within a specific line of business. Sections 2 and 4 restrict officer and director salary increases as well as preferential payments for domestic health organizations with the total adjusted capital that's equal to or less than the organization's company action level RBC. Then there's a block of conforming changes that are made in numerous sections. I'm not going to list the sections because they're so numerous. As I mentioned, those make conforming and technical changes to remove references to the Commissioner of Health in connection with that shift of regulatory oversight from the Department of Health to the Department of Commerce. I would also flag that Section 58 also falls in this bucket. That Section 58 is a revisor instruction, which directs the revisor of statutes to replace the Commissioner of Health with Commissioner of Commerce in several statutes and regulations to effectuate the transition of regulatory oversight. Section 17 of this article transfers regulatory oversight of HMOs from the Commissioner of Health to the Commissioner of Commerce on July 1st, 2026. Section 22 requires the Commissioner of Commerce to share non-public data submitted in a HMO's annual report with 1, other state agencies, 2, federal regulatory agencies, and 3, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. Section 28 establishes a health maintenance organization regulation account in the Special Revenue Fund for the Commissioner of Commerce to administer Chapter 62D. That chapter relates to HMOs. Section 33 requires any state agency that either purchases healthcare services, provides oversight over health insurance rates, collects healthcare taxes, or regulates healthcare entities to provide non-public data that's requested by the Commissioner of Commerce in order to satisfy specified statutory duties with respect to monitoring the healthcare market. Section 35 requires the Commissioner of Commerce to share data reported under Section 62K.07 on covered prescription drugs with the Commissioner of Health. And then Section 57 requires the Commissioner of Commerce to provide pharmacy benefit manager annual transparency reports. Those reports are statutorily required pursuant to Section 62W.06. And the requirement is that those would be shared with the Commissioner of Health. Article 5 is the governor's proposed reinsurance language, but you will see a note if you do look at that bill index that was provided that it does have a modification. Specifically, Senate File 5046 proposed expanding those health carriers that are being assessed to fund the final year of the reinsurance program from group carriers operating under the Minnesota Premium Security Plan in benefit year 2027 to group health carriers operating in Minnesota during benefit year 2027. That change could capture some group health carriers that don't offer individual market health plans. The modification noted in this index is a reversion of the proposed expansion such that the health carriers that would be assessed remains the same as currently set forth in law. Then beginning in Article 6, which relates to health insurance provisions, you will start to see several Senate files. First, sections 1, then 3 and 4, and then 9 and 10 are from Senate File 4390, which was authored by Senator Rasmussen. Those provisions create a new statutory framework governing short-term home health and nursing care insurance. The product covers short-term home health services as well as short-term nursing care services up to a maximum of 360 days. Section 2 is a Senator Wickland bill, specifically Senate File 4020. That provides individuals whose Medicare supplement policies have involuntarily ceased with a guaranteed issue right to any Medicare supplement policy offered by an insurer. It further provides a guarantee issuance right for plan year 2027 to such individuals whose enrollment ceased in calendar year 2025. There was a modification to this language. Specifically, the modification made was to remove language that allowed current Medigap policyholders to switch to an equivalent or lesser Medigap plan from a different carrier with guaranteed issue rights. Sections 5 and 6 of this article are from Senate File 1856, authored by Senator May Quaid. This proposal clarifies that a utilization review organization is prohibited from exclusively using artificial intelligence to make an adverse determination for coverage of benefits. Section 7 is Senator Wickland bill, Senate File 4018, that requires all health plans to reimburse clinical trainees in an amount that is at least as much as that paid to independently licensed mental health professionals when the clinical trainee is providing an alcoholism, a mental health, or a chemical dependency service. That language was also modified, although the change is just a technical one worked on with the Department of Commerce to clarify the language around an exception from the requirement in that proposal. And finally, Section 8 is a Senator Bolden bill, Senate File 4502. It clarifies coverage requirements for home care nursing services for certain individuals by prohibiting health plans from imposing quantity limits on such services.
Moving on to Article 7. Article 7 contains various consumer protection provisions. Sections 1 and 2 is language from House File 3642, which is the House companion to Senator Hemmingson Yeager's Senate File 3868. This language prohibits virtual currency kiosks, but allows new and existing customers to request a payout of funds from virtual currency kiosks and creates an exception for operators who maintain other means for customers to access, transfer, or redeem money or virtual currency. Section 15 is the repealer, which repeals sections related to virtual currency kiosks. Sections 3 and 4 contain language from the Department of Commerce, which amends provisions related to scrap metal dealers and the applications to sell scrap metal copper. Section 5 is language from Senator McQuaid's Senate File 1119, the first engrossment, prohibiting notification technology. The language here contains an exemption that was not previously included in the Senate language. The language exempts websites and applications that require technical skill of a user to notify an image or video. Section 6 is from Senator Rasmussen's Senate File 4474, the first engrossment, which prohibits online sweepstakes games. Section 7 is from Senator Draheim's Senate File 3650, the second engrossment, which prohibits television advertisements for the sale of prescription drugs. Sections 8 to 12 are from Senator Dibble's Senate File 1943, the second engrossment, which prohibits pet shops from selling cats and dogs. Sections 13 and 14 are from Senator McQuaid's Senate File 1857, the second engrossment, which prohibits minors from using chatbots. Please note that the definition of chatbot has been modified since the language was last in front of the committee. Article 8 is from Senator Klein, Senate File 4264, as amended in committee. The language establishes regulations related to crowdfunding. It modifies provisions related to securities, broker-dealers, and broker-dealers' agents, and requires written supervisory procedures, business continuity plans, physical security and cybersecurity policies and procedures. Article 8 also outlines what practices are considered dishonest or unethical. Article 9 is from Senator Rasmussen's Senate File 4496, the first engrossment, which modifies provisions related to telephone company regulations, infrastructure pricing plans, service classification, and reporting requirements. It also repeals several obsolete statutes. Article 10 contains various provisions related to insurance and financial products, and unfortunately, we will be jumping around in the sections quite a bit in this article. Sections 1 and 6 are from Senator Seeberger's Senate File 3794, which establish requirements for banking institutions and credit unions related to virtual currency services. Sections 2 to 5 are from Senator Frentz's Senate File 4444, which authorizes credit unions to obtain insurance from a credit union share insurance provider. Sections 7 to 19 and sections 37 to 46 are from the underlying bill, Senate File 4365, as amended in committee. The language in these sections establish residential mortgage loan servicing standards, modifies provisions related to student loan lenders and servicers, reporting requirements. It clarifies provisions related to the transfer of student loans and requires notice of transfer. This language modifies provisions related to lead generators and requires notice to the commissioner of a civil judgment, disciplinary action, or criminal offense. Going back to sections 20 to 26, these sections contain language from Senator Utke's Senate File 4157, the first engrossment. The language here establishes the Rental Home Marketplace Guarantees Act. Section 27 is from Senator Dames's Senate File 1109, as amended in committee, which requires insurance companies to accept individual taxpayer identification numbers instead of Social Security numbers. Sections 28 and then sections 31 to 36 are from Senator Seeberger's Senate File 3779, which modifies provisions related to travel insurance and authorizes the commissioner to issue limited lines travel insurance producer licenses. Here, the language has been modified slightly to remove the provision related to the premium tax. Sections 29 to 30 are from Senator Westland's Senate File 4406, the first engrossment. This language prohibits homeowners insurance from excluding coverage for property damage if the homeowner is an innocent third party and the damage is a result of a peace officer's use of chemical irritant, smoke screens, or diversionary devices. Here, the language was slightly modified to reinsert language that was taken out by the amendment adopted when the language was last heard in Commerce. That change is reflected on page 137, lines 28 to 29. Article 11 contains language from Senator Klein's Senate File 4366, the first engrossment. This language establishes when funds held for prepayment of funeral-related expenses and virtual currency is considered abandoned for purposes of the state's unclaimed property laws. Finally, Article 12. This article contains several miscellaneous and technical provisions. Sections 1 to 6 and sections 8 to 34 are from Senate File 4364 as amended in committee. The language makes several technical changes related to gasoline and ethanol and clarifies when annual statements must be filed with the Commissioner. There was one section from Senate File 4364 related to student loans that was not included in this article as it was duplicated in a previous article. Sections 7 and 36 are from Senator Klein, Senate File 3769, which extends Minnesota's existing prohibition on drug manufacturers restricting the delivery of 340B prescription drugs to contract pharmacies by removing a July 1st, 2027 sunset date. Section 35 is from Senator Duckworth's Senate File 4515, the first engrossment, which amends the maximum value of a merchandise prize which may be awarded for a paddle ticket. It prohibits an organization from selling a paddle ticket for more than $5. And that's the amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Severson and Mr. Hudella. We will be discussing this next time, correct? Which is, when are we meeting? When? On Thursday. Spreadsheet. Yeah, can Ms. Boyd review the spreadsheet? Thanks for the reminder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This shouldn't take long. I'm going to focus on the Senate side, but it largely duplicates the governor's fiscal items. Lines 4 and 5 and 12 and 13 shows the transfer of regulation authority from the Department of Health to the Department of Commerce for HMOs. The appropriations appear in lines 4 and 5 for Department of Commerce, and the reductions of the same amounts appear on lines 12 and 13 for the Department of Health. Line 7 is another governor's recommendation, the non-depository institution licensing provisions. This is a statutory reduction of appropriations from the financial institutions account in the special revenue fund of $6,000 a year, starting in fiscal year 28. And you'll see below in the revenue items on line 27, that's also, that's offset by a reduction in revenues to that account as well. So that's a net zero for that item. And then, let's see. I'm missing one. Okay, and the only other item that I would point out is on line 28. That is from Senator Aki's Senate File 4157 for short-term rental guarantees and reimbursement insurance. This is an increase in revenue to the general fund of $15,000 a year, starting in fiscal year 27.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. Any questions from members of the committee? All right, seeing none, Senate File 4365 as amended will be laid over. And we're done, right? There being no further business before the committee, we are adjourned.